Vicki Voland and the Goblins, Ghosts and Ghouls by S.P. Witchell. Chapter 1. "There's no wolf in there, stupid," the little girl muttered to herself. Vicki Voland teetered at the edge of the backyard where her old outdoor easel stood. Large paw prints circled the muddied lawn just outside the woodland bordering the Voland house. The dry autumn leaves began rustling and whispering in a breeze, and a gust of wind came rushing out of the tree line, sending a chill to her knees. The gloomy day cast a shadow through the woods, so dark and so worrying that it made Vicki wonder exactly how far into town a wolf might travel. She gathered her scarlet, oversized hoodie around her, feeling just like Little Red Riding Hood as she ventured out to the easel. It didn't help matters that Vicki was a dead ringer for the girl in the old fairy tale. Like Little Red Riding Hood, she too was quite small, with messy blonde hair and big blue eyes. Her own mother had even commented on the likeness once long ago when reading the story to Vicki, remarking that the girl in the illustration even had the same gap in her front teeth and shared her button nose. It seemed that the backyard intruder had shared something in common with the big bad wolf as well. These paw prints were enormous. They were so big, in fact, that a running shoe would easily fit into one, and she weighed the option of simply leaving the easel to the elements for one more day. Vicki let her eyes follow the path of the huge animal tracks, cowering for a moment as those trees swayed once more in the heavy breeze. She was in the 8th grade now, hardly a little child anymore. It was time to put away childhood fears and discarded paints. Time to start acting more like an adult, especially after the embarrassment of her previous summer. Even so, such a massive animal would certainly give anyone pause. She inched forward to grab the old weather-beaten easel, placing her foot down into another one of the large paw prints. Glimmering mud seeped up from last night's rain, the paw print filled with a crimson so deep and so thick that it made her pull her foot away with a gasp. An explosion of cracking branches blasted out from somewhere in the swaying trees, and she snatched the easel up, spilling more of her paints to the ground. She went stumbling over a brightly colored bird path before running to the safety of the house. The easel slipped from her hand with a great crash as she bolted through the back door, slamming it shut with such force that the family portraits above the fireplace fell to the floor. She stood, staring out through the sliding glass door, wondering what had left those paw prints in the night, what had been pacing back and forth beneath the window. She leaned against the door, resolving to let her father retrieve the easel and paints when he returned home. Yet one more abandoned art station for him to stack against her closet door. "Oh, you dummy," she hissed at herself as she watched more dark red paint drain onto the lawn outside. The large-pawed culprit poked his nose out from the trees. A rather well-fed Labrador came lumbering out of the woods just beyond the fence line. Vicki groaned as the flabby old dog crossed the yard to grab a fallen stick before running back to its owner. The man and woman waved at her from the woodland walking trail, and she returned a polite smile. She turned her attention to a family portrait, inspecting its frame to make sure that nothing had broken. Her heart still pounding and hands fumbling with fright. She struggled on her tiptoes to hang the happy wintertime portrait back in its place. She took another look at the photo as she stood back from the frame. Vicki stood with her mother and father, snuggling into them, while the older brother Max stood at the ready with a snowball aimed at the camera. She adjusted the tilt of the portrait one more time and gave herself an approving nod. "What was that crash?" yelled her mother from the upstairs bathroom. "Nothing. I just dropped a few things. It's all okay." Vicki held her breath, trying to calm herself and relax. "Don't make a mess. They're coming back with the groceries any minute," called down Mrs. Voland. Her beloved grandpa, Eckert, sat in his own portrait close by. Vicki found herself bubbling over with joy at the prospect of finally seeing him again after such a long time. An entire year had passed since she had painted Mount Diablo for him. He hadn't written to her or called her for the past 6 months at least. In just 3 days' time, he would be coming for a visit, and Vicki could hardly contain her excitement. A quick knock came from the front door, and she rushed over, expecting to greet her brother with armfuls of groceries. "I'll get it," she yelled up to her mother. She steadied her nerves and opened the door to two of the very few girls left from her former scouts troop that would still talk to her. She immediately felt crushed by an enormous weight upon her chest. Rachel and Jade stood in the doorway, dressed in full scouts uniforms, wearing wide smiles upon their faces. Rachel, the tallest of the three, could have been Vicky's sister, only with far darker eyebrows and a slightly sharper nose. Jade was umber-toned, with a face full of dark freckles, wearing 2 buns on her head of curly brown hair. Jade's cute dimpled chin and golden brown eyes had landed her on the Scouts recruitment brochure of the previous summer. Vicky often wondered if her own photo was still in the Dankville spring run advertised on the back of the same little booklet. "Vicky," sang out Rachel as she opened the door. "You never made it to the park, and I thought you said that you were coming. Is everything okay?" Vicky leaned into the doorframe as she spoke. I forgot. I'm sorry. I was getting some things ready for when my grandpa comes to visit. I guess I just got caught up with that instead." Jade nudged Rachel in the ribs. "I told you she was busy," she whispered. "Well, Jade and we were wondering if you asked your mom about us coming to read to the old folks at her nursing home yet." Rachel gripped her hands together, smiling at Vicky. "We already have a little tea cart put together and everything. We can even use our scout cookies." She cleared her throat and bit her lip, averting her eyes for just a moment. "We have lots of goodies for them, unless they have diet restrictions or things like that. And, Vicky, you could help us too." Vicky gave her an absent nod. "Oh, I still have to ask her. Sorry. I bet she'll say it's okay. Like it is just going to be the 2 of you, though. I think it's a pretty big nursing home. You might need 3 or 4 of you to get it done." Jade cast a worried glance to Rachel, seeing that her crescent-fallen gaze had turned to the ground. "Vicky, weren't you helping your mom there this summer with all of the old people?" she asked. Vicky shrugged. "No, my mom said that I should wait another year, especially after the cookies." The other girls grew quiet, fidgeting in discomfort at the very mention of the baked goods. "Plus, I don't think I'd be any good around a whole bunch of old people anyways. I'd probably mix up their pills by accident. Everyone knows I'm an airhead," she said, rolling her eyes. Rachel straightened her posture and beamed at Vicky. "It's okay. We couldn't really take care of a bunch of old people either. We can pour them some tea and coffee, and that's about it," she said as she removed her beret. "Listen, we're all going to the Iron Horse Mall. Do you want to come with us? My dad is giving us a ride. So we're going in style." She sang her words and gave Vicky a hopeful little grin. Vicky shook her head, biting her lip. No, I think it'd be better to stay in. I don't feel so good. And it looks like it's going to rain too," she said, looking up into the overcast sky. Rachel stared up into the gloom of the day. The smile fell from her face and she gave Vicky a nod. "Okay. Well, if you change your mind, maybe call me. I'm always on my phone, I promise." With that, the 2 girls turned to leave. Vicky went to close the door, but Rachel came scurrying back. She tugged on Vicky's oversized hoodie, whispering down to her. "Vicky, I don't think you're any of that stuff. You shouldn't let it get into your head like that." She stepped away with a sad little smile, joining Jade in the driveway with one last wave goodbye. Vicky closed the door and huffed out, turning around to come face to face with her mother. Mrs. Voland stood in the kitchen, fiddling with her dewdrop-shaped earrings and staring down at Vicky with a sad look in her eyes. The tall blonde woman with a sharp beak of a nose put her hands on her hips, taking in a deep breath. "Vicky, you wanted to go with them. Why didn't you go? Rachel's been calling every weekend asking for you. We hardly see her anymore." Mrs. Voland leaned back against the kitchen island, crossing her arms. "And you know full well that you remembered about meeting them in the park today. I saw you getting your paints together to help them. Why are you lying to her like that?" she asked. I don't know, I'm just..." Vicky bit her lip and kicked her bright pink running shoes off from her feet. "I don't think the other girls want me there. Rachel's just being nice. Maybe. I don't know. She joined the Scouts because you joined them first, and it's been a whole year now. You need to open up again and move on. I know it's hard, but you have to try. If you keep on like this, your friends are going to move on without you. You don't want to end up alone, do you?" The mobile phone rang out from within her jacket pocket, and Miss Voland shook a finger at Vicki. "We're talking about this when I come back." She answered her phone call and left for the upstairs. Another series of knocks came from the front door, and Vicki's heart fluttered, thinking that it might be Rachel again. She reached for the door handle and paused. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she could have sworn that she had heard a voice whispering, "Don't." A definitive air of foreboding swirled around her, and she took her hand away from the doorknob. The silhouette on the other side of the door's large glass window loomed motionless, like a tall, thin statue. The person knocked again, and Vicki froze in place, her eyes glued on the door handle. Cold, dancing butterflies filled her stomach, and a chill went up the back of her neck. "Hello?" asked Vicki as she peeked out through the window alongside the doorframe. "Hello. I'm here on behalf of the Charles family, and I have a few documents that need to be signed," said the woman from the other side of the door. "Is the representative from Hammer, Staker, and Thumps here yet? I need his signature as well." "Who? Are you looking for my grandpa, Eckerd Charles? He doesn't live here. He lives in England. He's coming here in a few days. Is he supposed to meet you?" Vicki cracked the door open, letting the cool September air into the house. She looked up into the woman's face. She was a very pleasant-looking woman, dressed for business and wearing a friendly smile. Vicki thought that the woman would have been on television or on the cover of a foreign magazine. The alabaster, slender woman in the professional red pantsuit and meticulously styled strawberry blonde hair gave a little wiggle of her fingers to the girl behind the door. The woman smiled down at her, crossing her hands over the briefcase. Her green eyes darted around the kitchen area behind Vicki and then settled back down to the young girl. "Hello there. You must be Vicki?" The woman dug into her briefcase and pulled out a sheet of paper. She checked the document in her hand and then held it out to her for the taking. "Oh, I've been so excited to meet you. Your grandfather talked about you a lot. You look so much like your mother. Go on. I won't bite." Vicki took the large piece of paper from the woman's hand, still hiding part way behind the door. The document was full of legalese, and the front looked old. Very old. It reminded Vicki of an old treasure map with the faded yellow parchment and handwritten lettering at the bottom. She could understand almost nothing on the paper, save for the words "Contract for the role of housekeeper, penalties and stipend novations for Eckerd C. Charles." "That's really for your parents to sign. Are they home? Can you tell them that Miss Charles' attorney is here to see them?" The woman brought a hand up to her mouth in embarrassment. "Oh my goodness, how rude of me. My name is Ciara Shuck. I work for your aunt. Miss Charles sent me." "Oh, sure. My mom is up." Vicki glanced down at the Shucks woman's shoes, losing her train of thought. Sierra's tattered red pumps were covered in mud stains, one of them being fully torn through the side as if the woman's foot had burst straight through it. The stains were not fresh, and that was what drew Vicki's attention the most. The mud was from at least the day before, but that wasn't all. Some of the mud was caked with the familiar deep crimson. Vicki let her eyes drift upward to the woman's shins. Long tufts of blonde hair had been carefully hidden away into the tops of the red pumps, but a few betrayed their hiding places. Ciara Shuck's legs were shapely, formed much like a ballet dancer's or a soccer player's might be, yet something about them seemed wrong. The woman's legs were too skinny at the knee and too long at the heel. "Well, if she isn't available to come to the door, I could come in and wait," said Ciara with a broad smile. Her teeth came down sharply together, all of them being just a little too long from that mouth. "I'm afraid that Miss Charles isn't able to join us until certain legal requirements are met, so I'm here in her place. I'd be happy to wait with you." "No!" Vicki squeaked out in a panic with a push of the front door. She stood behind the door, staring up at the woman's perfectly white yet abnormally long teeth. Panic filled her body, and she shivered as she spoke. "No, I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to. I need to talk to my parents first. They've been sick, so maybe you should just come back later. They might be contagious." She stood behind the door, averting her eyes from Ciara's legs, trying hard to conceal her fright of the woman. "Oh, that's okay, I understand," said Ciara. She loosened the red jacket from her shoulders, draping it over her hairy arms. She continued in an overly friendly tone. You can never be too careful, stranger danger, right? I promise you that little paper there will have you feeling all better in a snap." Sierra leaned to her side, staring at Vicki. She snapped her elongated fingers together, revealing her horribly distorted red nails. The broken nails clicked together and seemed to grow longer as she put her hands back down in her briefcase. Vicki trembled. Giving an audible gulp, she leaned into the door, putting her foot firmly against it. The cold sensation crept up from her neck and all the way to the top of her head. They're going to get better soon. There's a doctor coming, our own lawyer. He's coming too. In fact, a lot of people are coming any time now," she added with a nervous smile. "Oh, really?" asked Sierra as she pressed her hand to the other side of the door. Her nails scraped against the paint, and wood shavings began curling up underneath her fingertips as she dragged them downward. "Well, that's just perfect. We have a lot of papers to go over. Inside." Sierra took a deep inhale of air. Her stomach rumbled out of hunger. A second low growl emanated from the shapely lawyer's body, and Vicki stepped back from the door. Her legs trembled with fear, and her whole body went cold at the sight of the woman's piercing green eyes. Vicki's hand shook uncontrollably, and she nearly dropped the legal contract to the floor. Can you just come back later?" Vicki asked, clutching the paper on the side. I think I need to go check on Mom." Sierra raked her nails down, holding a hand lightly against the doorknob. Vicki's eyes widened as the woman loudly sniffed the air between the two of them. She let out a tiny whimper as the woman's stomach groaned out again, making her drop the contract to the floor. She brought her clumsy fingers to the door's deadbolt as Sierra stared down at her with those strange green eyes. The grumbling woman cocked her head to the side and clicked her tongue, pursing her lips at Vicki. "My," said Sierra as her lips curled into a show of teeth. "What great big eyes you have." Vicki struggled at the doorknob, trying to shut the door as hard as she possibly could. But try as hard as she might, she could not budge the door an inch. It was as if the horrible woman held tightly to the door from the other side, yet Vicki could clearly see the woman stood holding the handle without any strain at all. She was paralyzed to the spot, staring up at the emerald eyes of Sierra Shuck, trembling as the woman's smile began twisting into an unnatural long crease that stretched from ear to ear. "Hey, get away from her!" From behind the tall woman in red came her brother's voice and his racing feet. Max came around the corner of the house and swept past the woman at the door, his wavy mop of auburn hair matted down with sweat. He glared up at Sierra and pushed Vicki back into the house, his fierce blue eyes almost matching the glow of those horrible green dots in the doorway. The stout, pepper-haired Mr. Voland rounded the corner as well, shouting out and running at the tall woman in red. Sierra snapped around to Vicki's father and began speaking in an unsettling low voice. Max pushed Vicki's father into the house with trembling hands. Vicki stood in a daze, staring at Sierra Shuck, who in turn seemed to keep those green eyes fixed on her even as she traded words with Mr. Voland. Angry words were exchanged, and the world became a blur around her. An entire conversation took place between her father and the woman at the door, but Vicki was unable to follow any of it. The door finally slammed shut, and Max came floating over to her. He shook her violently by the shoulders until she snapped out of a weird fugue state. "Wake up! What the heck is wrong with you? Why were you just standing there like that?" Max rocked her left and right, his voice reaching a panicked pitch. "Don't ever open the door for her again." "I couldn't close the door. I don't know why." She raised the piece of paper up to Max and stared at her father. "She doesn't know, Max." Mr. Voland looked at the document in Vicki's hand. His face went as pale as she ever had seen it, as white as the paper. His pug nose glowed red from a marathon of running and shouting. He wrapped Vicki in a hug and squeezed her tight. "Where were you? You said that you'd be in the park with your friends." Vicki broke away from her father, coming out of the daze and shaking from the cold pit in her stomach. "I'm sorry," she said with a shiver. I decided not to go. I don't know why. I'm sorry." Max gripped her shoulders and gave her a sigh of relief. "You're okay. We were so worried that she... Max's voice trailed off, and he shook his head, gripping the black wooden ring around his finger. Mr. Voland waved his hand at Max and called to the upstairs. Ellie, we're home. He took his mobile phone from his pocket and cursed. It's like they killed the network. I still don't have any bars. Even my messages are down. Vicki looked up between the two of them with teary eyes. That woman was like a monster, Dad. Like a real monster. You should have seen her face. Mr. Voland squeezed her shoulder. I know. I'm sorry. There's a lot that we need to talk about. Mrs. Voland came rushing down from the upstairs, carrying a bundle of stuffed travel bags. An overstuffed duffel bag, slung across her shoulder, crashed into a vase by the stairwell, smashing it to pieces. Mrs. Voland paid no mind to it and instead went racing over to Vicki, placing the bag into the girl's hands. Vicki, you're going to have to pack right now. We all have to pack and go. Her mother wept and squeezed Vicki with such a force that the girl let out a heavy wheeze. She looked to Mr. Voland, wiping a tear from her eye. Did you get it? The call from Aether. Just before we got here, we went looking for Vicki. It blew out my phone. I think that it's dead. Mr. Voland rubbed the sides of his face. That thing was already here. Zalda's little flying monkey. It was talking to her, he whispered. Ciara Shuck? Already? What's going on? Who is that lady? Kiara Shook? Vicki wrestled herself away from her mother's arms. And why did she give me this? She held the old document up for her mother. Mrs. Voland recoiled at the sight of the document, snagging it from Vicki's hand and immediately throwing it away into the kitchen sink. Don't even look at it, she said with a tremble. She grabbed onto Vicki's arm. You need to go upstairs and pack for a few days. We have to leave tonight. Max, go and help her. You pack too. What? Why? Exclaimed Vicki. She looked around at the three of them. Mom, just tell me what is happening. Mrs. Voland took a deep breath, smoothing down Vicki's hair as she spoke. Vicki, you need to brace yourself. We lost Grandpa Eckerd this morning. We all knew this day was coming. He was very old and very ill. Vicki whimpered and dropped her bag onto the floor. Her mother dragged her inward for another hug, motioning for Mr. Voland to join them. Max looked to the floor, kicking his foot against the carpet, trying not to tear up at the sound of Vicki sobbing. A rumble of thunder shook the house, and a quiet pitter-patter of raindrops against the window began to fill the room. He isn't even that old. My gym teacher is older than him, and Grandpa doesn't even use a cane, she said through her heavy breaths. He said that he was going to visit. He wasn't sick or anything. Vicki sobbed into Mrs. Voland's sleeve and hid her face. He was older and more tired than he looked. I'm sorry, Vicki. We should have told you. We didn't want you to worry about that too. Not with all of the trouble that you were having. He wanted to visit so much. He really did. Mrs. Voland sniffled gently, lifting Vicki's face to her own. And I'm sorry, Vicki. I really am. But we have to go right now. We don't have time to mourn yet. We need to leave the house for a few days. We just have to. Mr. Voland sighed and rubbed Vicki's shoulders, looking up into Mrs. Voland's eyes. Ellie, we need to tell her. I think we're way past time now. That evil mutt was right on our doorstep. No, Stephen, don't. We'll discuss it all in Manchester, said Mrs. Voland with a sharp tone. Manchester? Like England? Isn't that where Grandpa's house is? Vicki asked back at her father. Another rumble of thunder shook the house, and the rain began to cascade down the window panes. But what about school and everything? When are we coming back? Why do we have to go? She sniffled and wiped the tears from her cheeks. Max gripped the black wooden ring around his finger. It's Aunt Zaldahide. She's the reason why we're running, isn't it? Max, hissed Mrs. Voland. We're not running away from anyone. Vicki looked up at Mrs. Voland and frowned, her chest still heaving. Well, who's Aunt Valdahide? Is she who that woman in red works for? She said that she worked for my aunt. Her face, Mom, I know that you said that it's always just my imagination, but I swear, for real, she was a monster or something. Thunder crashed just above the home. The foundations shook and the windows rattled. The lights flickered on and off as the flash of green lightning blasted through the sky. 3 great knocks came from the front door, each increasing in intensity. The family fell quiet, and the winds outside began to toss leaves and twigs against the home. Mr. Voland motioned for Max to join the 3 of them. "She's here," he whispered to Mrs. Voland. "That was Witch's step if I ever saw it." "Witch?" Vicki looked up between her parents, worried by the look of fear on their faces. "What do you mean? Like a pointy hat and broomstick witch?" "Mom," she asked, pulling on Mrs. Voland's arm. "Oh, what are you guys talking about?" Thunder crashed again. The knocking returned. 3 loud booming knocks, one after another. Leaves went flying away from the window and then returned in a wet mess against the glass, as if something large and ghastly stood breathing heavy against the house. Vicki stared wide-eyed at the darkening sky outside, watching as that breath caught the leaves again, sucking them inward to some unseen, lurking, monstrous thing before exhaling them against the glass. Max spun the ring on his finger around and stared out the window. "Aunt Zaldahide is a witch, a real witch, Vicki. She's evil and crazy, and now that Grandpa's gone, she's not afraid to come here. That's why we have to leave." Vicki shrieked as the house shook once more from the thunderous knocks upon the door. "Mom, what is he talking about? Is she a witch? Is that true? Like a really real witch? Like the Wizard of Oz?" "He's lying, isn't he? Witches aren't real." "Vicki, your aunt is a very sick woman," her mother began. She brought Vicki close and spoke in a comforting tone as she began taking quick, sharp breaths. "Not like your grandpa was sick. Not ill. Not like that. She's very troubled." Vicki and her mother both jumped as the booming knock at the door returned. 3 more crashing knocks rattled the door hinges. Thunder rumbled and the lights in the house dimmed. Max went running over to one of the kitchen drawers to find a flashlight. "That's a crock," Max yelled as he pointed at the door. "You guys have to tell her the truth. You can't pretend this stuff isn't real anymore, and you can't keep hiding it from us." "Max, we've talked about this. We're not pretending or hiding anything," said Mrs. Voland. "Just please go and take her upstairs." Max turned his attention to the fruit basket behind his father and gasped. The apples and oranges began rotting, shriveling to black little lumps as flowers in the vase at the end of the window began wilting to dust before their eyes. The pleasant scent of homemade potpourri disappeared, replaced by the smell of rotten mold, of wet soil, and the stench of spoiled meat. "Look!" Vicki pointed at the refrigerator as it began creaking open. Sludge came slopping out from the shelves where the fresh food had once been. Green fuzzy mold began to grow up the walls and behind the appliance, becoming stringy vines of black grisly hairs, and slime began dropping down from the ceiling where the mold now took hold. The Voland family backed away into the living area, their attention on the front door. 2 more massive knocks hit the house. Boom! The first knock jostled the locks of the door. Boom! The second spun the deadbolt into an open position. Crash! On the third and last house-shaking knock, the front door swung open with a gust ushering in a blast of wind and rain. Fresh late afternoon air swirled into the house, driving the stench of rot from the room. The lights flickered on and off again as the shadow fell across the doorframe from the outside of the Voland house. Vicki let out a scream, and Max fell backward in a panic. Mr. Voland moved in front of his family, and Mrs. Voland hugged Vicki tightly to her hip. The door swung back and forth in the rain, seemingly opened by the wind itself until the crunch of a footstep came from the welcome mat outside. The shadow became a thin stick of a man in a yellow rain jacket and matching hat. He stepped into the house, carrying with him a soaking wet black briefcase. He paid no attention to the family as he glided his way to the kitchen island in front of them, setting the dripping briefcase down on top of it. The lights dimmed further. The strange man peered out from his hat, staring directly into Vicki's eyes. She hid inside her oversized scarlet hoodie with a squeak. "Vicki Voland?" he asked with a strained voice. "That's an old-fashioned choice, what with wolves about."